we don't give enough credit to the young minds, because a lot of times they are much more authentic than we are as adults, because we have other factors that we're trying to appear as strong or beautiful, or we know so much because we've grown up and we've finished our education, and so we have real world experience. And sometimes I think that actually works against us, and that children and young adults really present a much more authentic, real version of themselves than a lot of adults do.
All right, everybody, welcome again to an episode of Breakthroughs with Jordan Murphy, conversations about the defining moments that shape our lives. I am your host, Jordan Murphy, and on this show, we discuss experience that all humans share between breakthroughs and breakdowns that tend to precede the breakthroughs, and how those pivotal milestone experiences tend to pave the way in our lives, ultimately to success. Today's episode is sponsored by Audible. You know what actually I've come to discover is that I'm more of an auditory learner. I like to listen to stuff more than I like to read it. And the listening to it seems to sink into my thick skull better than reading it. So for a limited time, you can try Audible and get 2 free audiobooks. You just visit my website, breakthroughswithjordanmurphy.com, and follow the link on the homepage to take advantage of this sweet deal. This episode is also brought to you by Amazon Fresh. Now, if you're like me and you have a busy schedule, then Amazon Fresh could be the answer. I mean, it's the answer for me. It's super easy. It's super convenient. So skip the checkout line and have fresh groceries delivered to your door. This is a limited time offer. You just got to visit breakthroughswithjordanmurphy.com to get the $25 off your first order using Amazon Fresh. Click the Amazon Fresh link and get your $25 off your first order using Amazon Fresh. On today's show, got a great guest, friend of mine, Andrea Bowen. You may know her. First of all, you might not know her because she started so young. Extensive background on Broadway. When I met this young lady, I was so jealous because she started her illustrious career on Broadway playing Cosette in Les Miserables. But for us older folks, you probably know her more as Julie Mayer from the series Desperate Housewives. So Andrea took some time out of her day today to talk with me. So how's it going, Andrea?
Hi, it's going great. It's a sort of gray, a little bit drizzly day here in Brooklyn. So I'm very envious of you out in SoCal, and I'm very much missing the Los Angeles weather today.
Well, you were talking about the possibility of relocating, right?
Yes. So I'm actually in the thick of that now. My lease ends here at the end of the month, so I started officially packing yesterday, and am now my whole apartment is now in disarray, and it's a little maddening for somebody like me who likes things to be nice and neat and tidy.
Order. You like order.
Yeah, I do. Yeah. Like, I'm a combination of things. I'm not overly extreme about it, but I do like it. The external mess sort of manifests itself for me as internal mess. I'm one of those types of people.
Oh no, I think that's in any kind of people. I think personally, if you're feeling a mess inside, I find it's really, really therapeutic to clean my room or to reorganize my sock drawer.
Okay, so I'm that way too, but I know tons of people who are not that way, and I find it fascinating because I don't get it. For me, it's like when I have a lot of restless energy, the very first thing I do is either clean, or I like move furniture around the house, or I have to just sort of shake up my surroundings.
Yeah.
In an orderly way, and that is very therapeutic. So I'm right there with you.
No, I think that we're already just giving gems here, like little morsels of.
Yeah,
we're so wise.
These are daily breakthrough. Oh my God, we're so wise. This is why you played my dad. It runs in the family.
That's right. That's right. Our amazing movie together on Up TV.
Yes,
that's right.
Up TV.
We had a really good time on that show. I mean, that movie.
We did. It was such a fun shoot. I mean, we were up in Big Bear, and so we were all isolated from our day-to-day lives, and
hardly any cell service. We couldn't get cell service.
Yeah, I forgot about that. That's true. And we were shooting in that beautiful cabin most of the time, and it was great. I mean, it was such a lovely group of people, and I reflect on that time so happily. I really had a great time with that.
Yeah, I mean, you've been doing work on TV and film for many years. I've been in the, industry myself for quite a while, and it's always a pleasure. I mean, I gotta say, on a percentage rate, as far as having really great experiences and not so great experiences, thank God my percentages are higher than lower as far as having great experiences.
Yeah, I feel the same way. I feel so incredibly lucky to have the percentage of good, positive experiences working be so much higher. I mean, the margins by which it's higher for me, I feel like must put me in a very specific category of lucky people. Like I hear horror stories all the time, and I think, wow, I've been really fortunate. I mean, of course, we all have some that, little things here and there that are not as great or not as ideal, or you work with people where the chemistry's not as good or whatever, but yeah, no, I'm with you. I feel really, really lucky so far. Knock on wood.
Well, right. And I don't know. I mean, this is, again, I'm just theorizing here, but I kind of believe that we attract what we're putting out there.
Totally.
And if you're a kind, generous, good person who wants the best for everybody, in general, the likelihood is you're going to attract that. Now, it doesn't mean you're not going to attract some crap occasionally for you to perhaps work through, and maybe that's how we grow. I don't know, but either way around it. I mean, it's kind of like when I remember I went to France one time, and it was around the time that we all hated the French at that point. Remember, like American fries, not French fries, that whole thing.
Right.
And people were saying, "Oh, you're going to France. Everyone in France is assholes." And I was like, you know what? I had an incredibly good experience, even in Paris.
Right, where it was apparently the like mecca for that stereotype.
And if you go, I think if you go looking for it, you're gonna find it.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. Well, I mean, yeah, I think so too. My parents always kind of raised me with that mindset as well, and I think that there's a lot of truth to it. I also have found when it, relating back to like our industry that we work in, that the actors who have had the longest, most consistent careers, the ones who have stuck around and who have been able to be a part of many different types of projects and all that, they're always the loveliest to me. Like, you know what I mean? Like I've met people who, and it's like the ones who are sort of flash in the pan, so to speak, the ones who sort of hit it big and just sort of have one or two things or whatever. They're always the ones who are assholes, And I'm like, so I think that there's a lot of truth in that, in just sort of being, leading a positive, kind, conscious life is going to bring you more of that type of experience and help you to meet more of those types of people. So
you obviously started at a very young age, which kind of suggests to me one of two things. Either you were like shoved into it, or you or you had some sort of like, hey mom, can I go to this audition? I mean, you have a long history, so we're not going to cover all of it because there's so much to it.
No, we do not have enough time.
But I mean, at 6 years old, that's a pretty. I was going to ask.
Well, this is great. So this will lead us into what I wanted to talk about too.
Cool.
So yeah, I've been really fortunate when it comes to the family lottery situation. I sort of hit the jackpot. I'm the youngest of 6 kids. All were or are still currently in the business in some way, shape, or form. My parents were never in the business. I mean, my dad is very creative and artistic. He was a musician. My mom, is a huge lover of the arts. So a very, artistically minded, set of parents, but not that this is not their profession. And so they sort of, they're the antithesis of stage parents. I was not pushed into it. None of my siblings were either. They just kind of are wonderfully supportive people who helped cultivate this love that they saw in their children, that their children had, and this shared passion that we all happened to have had. And they encouraged it and supported us through it. And were sort of along for the ride with us. They were not really driving the ship so much as they were just sort of in the ship with us, but they were also just wonderful, steadfast parents.
How old were you when you did Lemon?
So I was 6.
It was 6. That's what I thought.
Yeah, I was 6. I still hold the title for the youngest Cosette ever.
You get like a little medal you get to wear around your neck and stuff.
It's like the mug, like world's best boss. I'm like, here's my mug. I have my coffee in it every day. Youngest Cosette ever. No, for those listening, there's not actually a real mug. But there should be. Someone can
I know what to get you now for Christmas.
Yeah, perfect. So I think I started doing, commercials and like small theater things around, I think I did my first commercial when I was 3. But I joined the union. I joined Equity and I joined SAG, now SAG-AFTRA, in 1996. So I've been a union member for 22 years now. So this is actually a perfect segue into, I know your podcast is all about breakthroughs, and I think that's it's such a wonderful thing to sort of check in every now and again with the breakthroughs that we're having in our lives or that we have had, and to listen to other stories. I mean, obviously, you and I have spoken about this, and I know that this was a catalyst for you making this. Is that thing that connects us, right? Are these moments that we have that illuminate other areas of our lives or something within ourselves that creates this amazing proactive change or just a new way of thinking or things like that. And I think it's so important to talk about this. So I'm honored to be on your show, but I also just want to congratulate you on doing it because I think it's a wonderful thing to talk about. Oh. You're welcome. But so in thinking about what I wanted to talk about, there's lots of times where you have bigger breakthroughs, right? That are things that really they're circumstantial maybe, or they're brought on by a big event that can be positive or negative, but they feel large, right? But I also think it's really important to talk about the smaller ones that sort of they might be small themselves, but they actually have a very huge impact on your life on a day-to-day basis. And that's really where I'm at. So basically, I noticed at some point over the last several years, and I think it's from having the experience of being on such a lovely, wonderful, successful TV show for so many years of my formative life. I shot the pilot of Desperate Housewives when I was 13, and we wrapped the series when I was 22. Yeah, and then coming off of that, having that end at a time in your life when sort of other people your age are also having a chapter end because they're coming out of college and things like that. But it's such a different sort of isolating experience in that it's not like I had a bunch of peers my own age going through the exact same thing. So there was no real like relatable tissue there for me to grab onto. So it just sort of felt like, okay, I'm at this new phase of my life. I'm entering into a new bracket of my career, this stability, all of this is changing or whatever. And I noticed very recently that I've been dissatisfied in terms of being creatively fulfilled in a way that was really confusing to me. And I couldn't figure out why this was happening. And then it sort of clicked for me. And it clicked for me, I would say, I think it really clicked for me one day at one audition. And it doesn't even matter what the audition was or but I can tell you that basically this breakthrough of mine is that I have a unique experience of having done this for so long, right? And starting a career as a child really, and starting this career as a child, has given me a very unique experience. And basically, I've noticed that the reason I've had dissatisfaction over the past several years is because the way I was approaching my business, so to speak, was as though it were a business. I was approaching it as somebody who, was thinking of it as a job because, there's certain elements of that have to happen. You have to sort of think about your livelihood and you have to think about paying your bills and all this stuff that I never associated with it when I was growing up because I didn't have to. And so I was able to approach it as play. And when you're a kid doing it, it does feel like an extension of your at-home playtime because what do kids do when they're at home or with their friends? They play a lot of imaginary games. You create all these fun games when you have these days where you're all hanging out at the pool or whatever. You play like you're mermaids or, when you're at home, you play like you're a stowaway on a train, or at least like that's what my childhood was filled with. And right. So when I would go to quote unquote work, it was the same thing. I was still in a make-believe environment, and I loved every second of it. And it felt like an extension of play to me all the time. And so I guess what I'm saying is that this loss of approaching my work that way had such a negative impact on my life because I lost the fun in it. I lost, auditions became pressure filled for me. They became anxiety ridden. They became something that I stopped looking at it as an opportunity to play. And I would prejudge things as well. You'd prejudge a project or something before you worked on it. Like, oh, I don't, this isn't that, or you're frustrated with the money behind it, or things that like, I never thought that way for the majority of my career because I was in a fortunate position where I was a kid, so I didn't handle that side of it. And I just viewed it as fun. And so I just got back into town after doing a play in Los Angeles. And
when was the, pardon me for interrupting. When was the audition that you said this happened at like an audition? There was like a shift. This was post Desperate Housewives. So you're older than 22 now.
This was, I would say this was 3 months ago.
Oh,
so
okay.
Recently. Oh yeah. Very recently. And what had happened was I went into the audition, and it was for a casting director. And this is why I think this is why I think this happened, is because I went into this audition and I was so, I really liked the material and I really thought that I was well suited for it. So innately there's that added pressure of like, oh, I want it. So I care more. So I'm more nervous, or you get attached. Yeah, of course, which is not a bad thing. Like you want to relate.
It's a slippery slope. That's all. It's such a razor's edge between surrender and attachment.
Exactly.
You want to be engaged. You want to be engaged. You want to have an intentionality around it, but you also kind of have to let it go. And there's that whole idea of holding it in a closed fist, like you're holding onto it, or holding onto it with an open palm. Both,
right?
That you have it both ways, but one has a little bit more force on it in the sense of it being tension added to it. That's unnecessary.
Right.
And what I hear you saying is that you used to be free of that tension, and now you have this strangely self-imposed tension.
Right. And when you grip something like that, you suffocate it as well. So you put a cap on how much you can really be present because you've already kind of closed in on it already. And so when I went into this room, I felt one way. And then when I came out of the room, I felt a different way. And the only thing that really happened in that room was I went in, it was a casting director that I hadn't seen since I was a child, because I'd been back and forth, to LA over the years. And so much of the time, I hadn't been in New York for a very long time consistently, like in rooms. I'd been in LA for so long. So there are lots of casting directors that I go see that are like, oh my God, the last time I saw you, you were 7 years old, Right. And this was one of those times. And, she had cast me in one of the very first real, meaty parts that I ever had, that really has held a dear spot in my life, because it was like, I'd gotten to do something, and it really like, I was so challenged by this role, and it was such a turning point for me. And it was my first really meaty television part and anything. She had cast me in this, and she brought that up, and I hadn't put two and two together that that's who I was going in for, or that's who I was seeing. And we started talking about that, and we started talking about that project. We started talking about, the life in between, my life in between then and now. And then we read I did my audition and everything, and it was great, and I felt great about it. And I left, and I felt so much lighter, and I felt so good about this audition. And I didn't care about the outcome. I didn't care about, it wasn't like, okay, now I want to immediately contact my agent and ask them to follow up. And now I'm just going to keep checking to see what I hear. And there was none of that. None of that. It was like, I felt like so free, and like I had just gone in there, and like 7-year-old Andrea had just walked into that room and played. You know what I mean?
Wow. Yeah.
And I ruminated on that, so to speak, after that, going like, well, why do I feel so much better now? Why do I feel so much lighter now?
Yeah. How do I do that again? How do I do that
exactly.
all the time?
Yeah, right. And then that's what led me to this new perspective of like, oh, I've lost
that
the play. I've lost kind of, right? Like a little bit. And like, I should have that more than most because I had it for so long, because I was fortunate enough to do this as a child and have had such a positive experience doing it, and have had a support system via my family, my parents, and, you know, the people that I worked with, always allowing me to tap into it being fun and playful and like optional. And so I want to bring that with me throughout the rest of my life as the way that I approach this thing that I've chosen to do with my life, you know? And I think it's really critical. And it's something that I've talked a lot about with my friends who are actors over the past 3 months, because it feels like this really important change of mindset that we really should be keeping at the forefront of our identities as actors. I just think it's really important.
No, I completely agree. And, you know, obviously you and I share a similar industry, but I think it's also as easy for anybody in any industry to really just consider being present. Like, where am I right now? Where am I going right now? How am I going to get there? Why am I stuck? And you're having those kinds of continuous conversations with ourselves, and you were having that conversation, or else you were kind of bumping up against something that didn't feel particularly good, and then you acknowledged it and you addressed it, and you started to dwell on it. You started to ask questions about it. And I think that we can all do that no matter what our background is, no matter what our job is in life, period. I think that a lot of the people I've been talking to on this podcast, there seems to be a consistent thread, obviously, of the fact that it's really about rigorous mindfulness.
Right.
Really being present. And it's not always easy. It's easy to be on autopilot. It really is easy to do it that way. And then we wonder why things go the way they go. And, you know, if they go the way they go and we're happy with it, great. If they don't, something's terribly wrong. Right. But there's just, you know, what I hear what you went into that room was that you went into the room attached. You went into the room kind of, like you said, with a cap on it, where you weren't going to maybe take certain risks because, if I do that, that's going to be too much. Or if I don't do that, it's not going to be enough, or whatever it is. All those conversations limiting your fun, limiting your creativity. And then you were fortunate enough to have come back together with a casting director who had that connection with you, and you were able to literally in the room, which I think to a certain degree is somewhat of a rare blessing in and of itself. I mean, there are a lot of great casting directors out there. I mean, honestly, there's some great casting directors out there who give you that kind of space and that time.
But there's also a fair share of ones who they themselves are very checked out and they give you very little.
Right. And so you're in that you had this really great opportunity to shift gears, literally change your state, change your mind in that moment, and come from a different place. And it kind of happened, kind of a happy accident, right? I mean, I don't think you, it sounds like it wasn't like you went in there and said, this is what I'm going to do. It just
It just happened. And, you know, and having just gotten back into town from working on a project in LA, I noticed immediately the difference in the way that I was on this project, because I just was freer. I was just freer, and it's been transformative. I mean, it really has. And I think, you know, it's true. Like, this is sort of a non sequitur, but it's related to the idea of like you said, rigorous mindfulness, which I think is an awesome term. And I would like to think about that all the time and use that. But you know, so I have a planner that I write in, that is old school, that I write everything down in that I'm doing. I write, you know, things that are upcoming. I mean, it's where I keep my schedule, but I also just, you know, I put everything in it, and I get a new one every year. And
you actually write with a pen and pencil long.
And I write with it. Yes. So this is my point. Okay. This is where I'm getting to, which is that they say that you remember things better when you actually write them down. It commits them to your memory better, which is why I started doing this. It was an attempt, it was like a physical manifestation of something that I wanted to have happen in my life internally as well as just, throughout my life, which is that idea of like, okay, if you have a stronger intention with what you're doing, then it's going to matter more to you and you're going to actually get these things done. Right. So I try and tell everybody that they should do this because I just personally, like, I don't really love relying on technology for everything because obviously, like, you can't fight the advancement of technology, nor should we. It's brought about a lot of really wonderful things, but I don't love having everything through like iCal or whatever, having everything just on my computer. I don't enjoy that because I feel like it's really easy to just sort of blur it over. It's just like if we, you know what I mean? Like there's something about opening my planner
magical.
And looking at, yes,
there's something magical
it's magical.
About it. Hard to explain. You cannot quantify it. It's just something about typing something down or literally writing it down. There's a distinction. And I have horrible handwriting. And
I do too.
And so I find myself not wanting to do that because I want to be able to like read what I wrote. And yet over the last few years, I do the same thing, a little thought catcher, right? You like literally write down your thoughts, write down what's going on, write down what you're processing, but write it down and put it in a journal, whatever you want to call it, right? Write it down. And I heard a great phrase about so we all talk about the law of attraction. Like you were saying, if you have your intentionality and you have you have something really powerful behind it and then you write it down, it enforces it is kind of what I'm hearing you saying, right?
Yes.
So the law of attraction, we all kind of throw that word around, that statement around a lot. And I think it can sometimes be either not interpreted.
Especially us actors, I feel.
Right. And I think since The Secret and since Oprah,
Oprah,
Deepak Oprah, as I like to call it.
That's amazing.
That it's the law of attraction can sometimes, I think, it's just this word that gets thrown out or this statement that gets thrown out as an idea, but isn't really defined. Sometimes you say to them, what is law of attraction to you? And you ask somebody to define it. Rarely can someone actually say what it even means to them, much less actually practice it, right? And I heard one that I loved because I kind of got into this whole thing over the last few years where if there's a word that is powerful to me, I look it up. I actually look the word up because I actually want to know what it means, like how it's been
true definition,
how it's been defined, and then kind of explore it from there. Either way around, long way around getting to this point. So,
I'm with you though.
The law of attraction I heard was great. It said thoughts, when emotionalized, become magnetized and attract similar and like thoughts.
Wow.
That's like the law of attraction in a nutshell, because anything that we have or intend to create in our lives, whether we did it on purpose or not, started with a thought.
Yeah.
And then it became a thought that you kept on thinking until that thought that you kept on thinking became a belief. And that belief became actions. And that action became us, that personality, that life that we have. So anyway, the idea of being able to, like you said, write things down and kind of capture them and being able to go back and review them also, it kind of rekindles that emotional fire and it keeps it present.
Yeah. Yeah, no, for sure. And I think it's something that we're losing, because of the ways in which technology has sort of integrated into our daily lives and existence. Like we're losing just the simple, we're hearing all the time that they're going to stop teaching certain things in school, right? Like I guess a lot of schools don't teach cursive anymore, which it's like, okay, I mean, it's bizarre to be a part of a.
My children go to a charter school, right? So, which is basically a fancy way of saying, public school with money.
Right.
And the thing about the school that blew my mind is that they have enrichment courses. Okay. So when you think of enrichment courses, people would tend to think, I guess, dance, theater, right? No. Science is one of the enrichment courses. The public schools in Los Angeles don't have science every day, if at all.
What?
Yeah. So they literally have an enrichment course, which is supported by funding, right?
So is it
funding.
optional?
Well, I guess. I mean, the LAUSD only has to provide a certain amount of science
education.
Yeah, which
oh my goodness,
kind of baffles the mind a little bit, right?
So it's
yes,
very
I mean these
frustrating.
These things that we're doing away with, the notion of even doing away with theater or dance or singing is so silly to me because I think it's so pivotal to a well-rounded individual. But that's obviously you and I are a little biased. So
oh yeah, of course, very biased, very biased. Also, I've done a lot of work with. So I work with this arts advocacy group called the Creative Coalition, and one of the many things that I've gotten to do with them is we went around to LA schools when I lived there, and we sort of talked to the schools, the faculty as well as the students. We sat in on some schools that had some level of arts education, and then we went to some that had no funding for arts education, so they had no programs for it, and we sort of got to talk about like the impact of having arts being a part of a child's education and all of the ways in which it actually not only is enriching for the child, but helps them learn the other subjects, helps them be a better student all around academically, not just, in terms of artistic stuff. So
that's right. You have to be stimulating both sides of the brain. That's kind of what I hear you saying. Yeah.
Yes, exactly.
Okay. So we've covered a bit, obviously, about your past and your career as an actor, starting very, very young. And it begs the question, from me at least, that most young actors who start out as young as you do, they don't tend to grow up fully formed. Now, here's the thing. I'm sure there are exceptions to the rule, and it seems to me you seem like a pretty level-headed gal. So
thank you.
I'm wondering, considering the amount of success, considering the amount of experience you had in that environment of, I hesitate to use the word ease, but there is a sense of like you were living in many worlds a dream.
Right.
Totally. And you weren't ever told this wasn't how life was supposed to be.
Right. Right.
Your context was, this is life.
This is my normal. Right?
Yes,
this is what I grow up as this is how I see the world, and this is the lens that I've always seen the world through. So that to me, in terms of my brain forming, that is what I associate with just regular living. This is how it works.
That's right. You get up in the morning and you go and you make goo gobs of money and you get to have fun and create and be on television and have people recognize you. I mean, it's a very unique world. Now, the question is, how did you get on the other side of it and not end up a mess? And now, again, I know I'm being hesitating here because I know there are young people who do go through what you've gone through and have come out on the other side okay. But we always hear the horror story. So I am curious what you think it is that allowed you to come out on the other side relatively sane.
So, well, thank you. I agree with using the word relatively in there. So I think that the simplest way I can answer that question, the most straightforward, simple thing, is to say that it's because of my family. It's because of my parents. It's because of my siblings. Because I think that is the right answer to that question. I think that there's many, many factors that played a role into sort of helping me avoid the more typical pitfalls that young actors can fall into. But I think the most straightforward answer is that it came from my family. I was never allowed to go too far in any one direction, because if I started believing in the hype too much, whether it was my own hype, whether it was just the glamorous lifestyle, whether it was, money related things or whatever it might be, I always had people checking me left, right, and center. I was the youngest of my family. So there's an inherent dynamic there of your older siblings sort of, lovingly picking on you, things like that, right? So I always had people lined up going like, if I stepped out of line, like, hey, what are you doing? Like, you're not that great. Like, come back to earth, Right. And my parents are really special people who always, throughout all of this, were able to kind of give me doses of perspective that kept me in the real world. I think one of the things that I knew that I was experiencing an atypical thing, like my parents would always tell me, enjoy this while it lasts because it will one day end. This is not your permanent situation. This is a gift, and this is an experience that you should treasure, but it is not something that you should view as what life is always.
Well, that's good.
And yeah, it is good. And I'm so grateful for that because, it's like you hear that throughout different times in your life, right? Like I have friends who are new parents or, you hear that especially, I think, at these big like benchmarks of your life where people say, enjoy this because it's going to go in a blink of an eye. Everything's going to change, Mm-hmm. And I had that reminder all the time from people in my life. And so I think that was a huge factor.
Was there ever an experience that you recall where you were getting a little too big for your britches specifically, like an actual event where you were right sized by your family?
I feel like that's a question for my siblings because I'm sure they remember that. I'm sure there are moments where they're like, excuse me, but I can't remember like a very specific instance where I was, really kind of brought back down to earth, so to speak. But I think that, it's, I don't know. I think that there's a lot of things that happen with young actors. And I personally, and again, like I can only speak from my experience. I can only speak from assumption because you never know what really is going on in another person's life, even if you have a lot to relate to them on, right? So like I don't relate to every other young actor out there just because we happen to also be doing the same thing at that mm-hmm. time in our lives. Mm-hmm. I really don't know what was going on in their life, but I've noticed a trend in that the ones who sort of go to the dark side, so to speak, or get, kind of off the path for a while and kind of,
they get lost.
The ones who get lost, what I've noticed is that the inception of their reasons for doing this don't always come from that they wanted to be doing it. Uh-huh. And I think that was different in my case because I loved what I was doing from the jump. I only ever felt like I was doing it because I wanted to. Yeah. I never felt I was doing it because, there were people in my life who wanted to make money off of me or that there were people in my life who had wanted to do it themselves and it never happened. So they were living vicariously through me. There was none of that. It was the same. I felt like me doing this professionally felt like the same way my parents would support me if I said, I want to play t-ball. I want to be on swim team. You know what I mean? Yeah. It never felt like, and even though it's not quite the same because obviously, it is a profession and you are out there, you're putting yourself out there, you are getting paid, there's all these other things that don't make it as casual as joining Little League. But to me, internally at home and in the approach that I had and that my parents had, that's what it felt like to me. It felt like I said, this is something I like doing. And they said, we support you. And it was as simple and as straightforward as that. And I think that helped kind of preserve a certain part of it for me that allowed me to, grow up along with it and not try and rebel and go, but like there's no easy answer to that question because it's tricky to talk about yourself too as being well-adjusted when we all feel like we're a bit off.
No. And I know it's occurring a little black and white. I'm really just saying, you haven't, to the best of my knowledge, haven't ended up in rehab, haven't ended up in the tabloids, haven't ended up making a mess of your world.
But I'll also give credit. I think people will like to hear this too in terms of growing up on the set of Desperate Housewives, because I think that, for so many years of that show, there was so much negative press about the women and the way that was and the way that, our set was, and there was so much drama. And that is an unfortunate side effect of having a show at that time when we were on the air starring 5 beautiful, talented women. There was there was always going to be press about them not getting along, because that's what, unfortunately, the media likes to cling to when it comes to women and the way women are with one another. So there was always that happening. But I love to kind of talk about this, because as an adult now, looking back and getting, to be a teenage girl on a show with such talented, strong, beautiful women leading that set. I mean, what a cool thing for me as a teenage girl to get to see. So my point being, I got great advice throughout the years from those women, especially Teri. And so I always felt like what I saw as my future as an actor, should I be so lucky, was what I saw in front of me. Women, as adult women in their careers, being successful, being level-headed, having well-balanced lives, and being lovely, kind, generous people. And so I got that as my interaction. I didn't have time, first of all, to be like out at the clubs, and doing that kind of a thing. But I also had people outside of my family in my own profession showing me how you can live this life and live it well and healthily. And that makes a huge difference too. Like I had really great role models all the time. Everywhere I went.
Was there any advice that you recall specifically, like any overarching advice?
I'm trying to think. I mean, Teri and I would have conversations all the time, every time we were together about things. And, what I always appreciated so much about her was she always allowed herself to be very vulnerable and very human. And so sometimes her advice would stem from things that, she would do that, in terms of like being overly, fixated on a certain scene, or wanting to do things, an exact certain way or whatever. And then based on what she was doing, she would tell me like, okay, now this is what you don't do. Don't do this. And she would give me advice based on, and it was always about, silly things. Like she was never doing anything wrong, but I always thought that was really funny.
Yeah.
But, I mean, I don't know if there was specific, like actual specific, words to live by, but,
it sounds like they were more, it sounds to me like you were immersed more in a group of powerful women, and there was just more of a modeling of what that was.
Yeah.
To be a modern, powerful woman in the entertainment industry, and how to act.
Right. And how to handle the sort of negative side effects of being an adult woman in this industry at the same time, at the for some of them, the peak of their career, it brought about such an onslaught of mixed things, of like excitement and good positivity, but also like a huge amount of negativity. So I had a really unique placement within that world, being a teenage girl who could have, that shaped me in so many ways. And I just am now starting to get a handle on that perspective, because as a woman in this day and age of where we're at currently in our, industry, I feel so lucky to have had that particular spot to view what it was like to be, a woman on a very successful TV show, and all of the stuff that brings about. And then I got to go home to a family that was so loving and supportive with, might I add, 3 very strong, amazing women in my family. So I don't know. I think that's the best answer I can give to how I've
that's great.
Stayed. Somewhat.
It's great. And what I wonder, because I hear so much, so much positive, so much that has come out of it that you've learned from, and I'm wondering, because you had to navigate, like all of us, everyone has to navigate whatever world they're walking through, and I guess I'm wondering, is there any fear that you tend to have to consistently confront, or one that maybe you used to be really shut down by but have since overcome? So it's a 2-part question to say, is there a fear that you still kind of have to work through all the time, or is there one that you used to that you've since worked through?
Yeah, I think that there's probably I think they're definitely connected, right? Like in a way, I definitely have a relatively normal fear, I think, being somebody in their 20s, being a woman in her 20s in the entertainment industry, which is that we have to be so, there's been such an emphasis placed on the way we look. Mm-hmm. And because of growing up on that set and because of being a part of that particular show and experience and sort of seeing how women are pitted against each other and picked apart based on those things, mainly physical appearance and, that type of thing. I definitely have struggled with sort of finding a healthy mindset to stay in regards to that. I think that it's really, really hard in today's age with social media being such a blessing and a curse for that, because it gives people a place to come together and to connect, but it also gives people a platform to be negative and mean. And I think that I have the same fear as a lot of like my female actor friends. We talk about this of like not being able to show your talent unless you make yourself fit into a mold first. Like that your talent will never matter as much to the people in the casting office and in the room with you as much as the way you look does. So that is placed second in a way that I so firmly disagree with, right? Like I think that obviously someone's talent and professionalism and drive to be good and all of the other things should be placed so much further up on the totem pole than how they look when they walk into a room. So that I think I've overcome in ways of self-acceptance and just sort of growing up and becoming more confident and all of those things. But I also, I think I would be lying if I said that that's still not, an ongoing fear of mine or an ongoing struggle of something that I have to work through. I think I'm in a better place with that now. And I have the hope that will only continue. But I think that, that's something that it was never a factor until it was. I mean, I remember when things started to change for me when I started transitioning from being like a child to a teenager to, late teens and then into my 20s. But the second that I started becoming like a teenager, all of a sudden factors came into why I would book a job, why I wouldn't, or just the way that people reacted to me, when meeting me or things like that, because all of a sudden I was changing from being a little kid where where it should be and, unacceptable. It should be unacceptable for everybody, but, where you're treated as a kid one way and then you're a teenage girl growing up and you're treated in another way. And that there's so much importance placed on that other thing. And that's tough. That's really, really tough. And it is something that I also think goes hand in hand with why so many young actors go into this other, go down this other darker road. Right. Because you start to question, like, you were loved, at one point in your life, and you were adored because you were this cute little kid. And now all of a sudden you're being scrutinized for the way that you grew up or, you're, and it's hard. It's really hard to navigate and it's really hard to keep your head on straight while you're trying to just grow up.
I can't even imagine going from being a young girl to being a teenager during what is a brutally transformative experience without living in the entertainment industry. Yeah. To have that just ratcheted up times 10. And
I used to have people come up to me all the time and say like, oh, wow, you look so different in real life. You look so much prettier than you do on TV. Oh. I mean, that would, and then keep in mind, they're saying this to a 15-year-old, 14-year-old, and it's like, what do you think that does to that kid that you're saying that to, And it's a really interesting thing. I have such a fierce level of craving to protect young actors. Like when I see teenage girls, but all teenagers like on TV shows, my guttural instinct is like, I hope there are people in their life who are protecting them because it can be really brutal. And like you said, you also are dealing with that side of it while acknowledging what a place of privilege you are in. So it's tough because, it's like, oh yeah, you can complain, but no one really wants to hear the kid who's, on a successful TV show complaining. So it's a unique thing. Yeah.
Yes, it is incredibly unique. You said something about this, these stereotypes of women and these molds that women have to fit into. And yet I've got to tread lightly here, but my feeling is that things have shifted dramatically as far as the landscape for female actors, right? Like kind of being able to like show their power in a very different way and have it be received in a very different way, whether it's directors, whether it's actors, what have you. Do you ever have the experience you go in for an audition or you're looking for roles, it's easy for you to fit into a certain type, right? Do you find yourself looking for, I was just reading something about Michael B. Jordan saying, I only want to take roles if they're meant for white characters, meant for white actors. He's really like, I don't want to be stereotyped as being the African-American character in this story.
Right.
I'm wondering, do you find yourself as an attractive young woman who's had the success you've had saying, you know what, I'm going to go outside the box here and I'm going to try something that I've not tried before because I can.
Right. Yeah. I mean, well, I think that this is interesting, right? Because for one, you know, I think the industry is in such a transitional period right now. I mean, in so many ways, like, yes, women's opinions as well as women's position of power are being given acknowledgement in a way that they haven't for so long. But that's a very slow process to undo all of the ways in which these things have been designed up until this point. You know, it's a gradual thing, and it's going to take constant effort and constant, you know, the conversation has to be loud and continuous. It cannot be for any amount of it to change, for a small drop in the bucket, you know, and while that is happening in a new way, it's not, you know, this like overnight, there's just a sudden shift. So there's that thing. But also our industry is changing in that, like, the medium itself is changing, right? There's so many more opportunities for content to get out there. And so the traditional ways of casting things and the traditional, you know, length of seasons for TV shows, all of that's very different, right? So now you have movie stars being open to taking parts that they never were before because, you know, movie stars didn't used to do television, and now that's completely different. And you have people open to doing, you know, streaming shows because they only have to do 10 episodes or 8 episodes and they can fit it in. And then there's a trickle down effect with that, right? Yeah. So then other actors who would typically take those roles are having to take smaller roles and smaller roles and smaller roles. And there's so much change happening within our industry that to limit yourself by saying, I only want to take this type of role is so noble because it speaks to what you care about and what you're passionate about, but it's also hard to do that because you want to take every opportunity that comes your way. Right. You want to at least be open to every opportunity that comes your way. So yes, ideally, I would really like to only be considering roles that truly speak to me and showing and helping the cause of showing women in a real, honest, authentic way, because there's been a lack of that for so very long. Yeah. So yeah, I mean, but I can also tell you that my favorite experiences as an actor, when I look back on the things that have brought me the most joy, they've never been the parts that I've taken because I fit into a mold that was written. They've always been parts where someone was willing to see me in a way that I hadn't gotten to be seen before. Got it. Always, you know, like, and so, yeah, I hope to have a lot more of that in my career. I certainly am way more excited by those opportunities than I am to just play the one note, you know, young girl who looks a certain way.
I look at these actresses like the lead in Handmaid, or like even like Elizabeth Marvel. It just sticks out to me as the actress in Homeland who plays the president. I don't know if you've watched her at all, but there's just something about her willingness to just go, this is who the fuck I am in this character. I'm not going to try to pretty it up. I'm not going to be docile. I'm going to be powerful, period. Yeah. And you see other portrayals of that in the past where women would soften it. Right. And exactly. Because they feel they have to, or they are told they have to. Exactly. Yeah. And I think this idea that I think it comes down to likability. Women are placed in a category where they have to always be likable, and that is not placed on men. Men's characters have been written in all versions of themselves, and we are fine with having unlikable leading men. Right. But we are not at a place where we are okay with that when it comes to women, and that's tough because you're completely blocking out an entire
part of what the human existence is.
Yeah.
You know, and all of us have sides of us that are unlikable. Everybody has things going on, you know, and so it's really doing a disservice to the art form itself when you do that.
That leads me into a question, actually.
Yeah.
Well, is there something about you that other people who know you would be surprised to learn? You just said something really interesting. You just said, we all have a dark side. What is Andrea's dark side?
I don't know. I think
you come across as such a sweet, nice, likable person. Thanks. And I'm like, where's the edge there? Where's Andrea's?
It's there. Trust me, it's there. I don't know. You know, I'm very much in the thick of sort of, getting to know myself in a new way, I think. And one of the things that I think is sort of a downside of my personality, or something that I think is directly related to growing up as an actor and having to, you know, be so, have my emotions so accessible to me, is that I am so closed off, and I'm capable of being so closed off with my emotions because I learned my emotions formed growing up, like everybody's do. But because I was an actor and I was a child actor, I sort of learned how to, you know, compartmentalize to a degree that I think now as an adult, I'm realizing is not healthy. And like right before we hopped on to talk, I was telling you, like, I'm in the midst of moving and I'm in the midst of chaos and da-da-da-da-da. And like, yet I can just go, okay, that goes over here now. I'm not going to deal with that. I'm going to focus on this. And while that can be an asset at times in your life, because you're able to get things done and you're able to be present and focus on something else while you have other things going on, it can also be a big downfall because you just ignore some things that you maybe should be looking at.
Well, I think it's really great about what you're saying, and I think this is a big distinction, is you're aware of it. The fact, if you weren't aware of it, that's where I think the psychosis can come in, or the real problems can come in, where the wreckage of that kind of tendency can really impact your life. At least you're having a conversation with me about it. It's like you could actually step outside and witness, oh, look at me doing that.
Right.
Which,
I know.
I think that's a skill set in and of itself. Right. I think that we can all benefit from being able to step outside and witness who we're being and how we can potentially occur in the world. So I think it's really fortunate and wise that you have that ability to not only have access to your emotions, but compartmentalize them when you need them or don't need them. Right. And know that that's what you're doing as opposed to it just kind of pulling you around by the nose.
Well, look, you asked me my dark side, and then you just spun it around into being a big positive. So
I totally did.
So thanks for that. I'm perfect. Thanks.
You're healed. You're healed.
Oh man. Oh yeah. It's all a journey, right? It's all a big, beautiful, complicated, messy journey that I feel lucky to be a part of. I feel lucky to be in an industry where, like the community of artists, I think is such a beautiful thing that that's what I get to kind of surround myself with. And like, you know, the conversation that we're having right now is one that's so real and honest. And I think that more people should connect like this on a regular basis. And I think in so many industries, there's no room for that. But in ours, because it's a unique one and because it's not a corporate business and it's not, you know, we get to have these types of exchanges more frequently than other people working in other industries. And I feel so grateful for that.
I concur.
Yeah.
You said something about, you know, being able to talk to young actresses, and obviously your perspective is very entertainment industry centric.
Yeah.
However, I do believe there is something to be said about we're all pretty much the same because we're human beings. What would you say if there was advice for, I have 2 young girls.
Yeah.
They're preteen, but it's around the corner. To young women, to young girls, period, is there advice that you would give in this transitional, transformative experience of going from young to teenage years?
Yeah. I guess I would say, you know, it's hard because you don't want to be cliche, right? You don't want to give the same advice that everybody gives that really doesn't mean anything, that just sounds good.
What's worked for you? What's worked for you that you've had to fall back on?
Yeah, well, I think that there's real truth in trusting in yourself, because I think one of the hardest things, especially for young girls, but I think what's really hard about adolescence is that it's really difficult to get people to take you seriously because you're written off as a kid, like, well, what do you know? You're just a kid. And I think that we don't give enough credit to the young minds, because a lot of times they are much more authentic than we are as adults, because we have other factors that we're trying to appear as strong or beautiful, or we know so much because we've grown up and we've finished our education. And so we have real world experience. And sometimes I think that actually works against us, and that children and young adults really present a much more authentic, real version of themselves than a lot of adults do. Yeah. So I think trusting your instincts and knowing that your opinions have value, and not deciding that just because you're younger than somebody that means that inherently you know less than them. I think that that's really important. It's something that helped me because I was in an adult world as a kid, and I always wanted to be taken seriously. I always wanted to be viewed as an equal, because I was expected the same degree of professionalism, and I was expected to be as mature as they were, but sometimes I wasn't treated the same. And the only way that I started to really get treated the same was to treat myself that way, to give myself the acknowledgement that my feelings mattered and my opinions and thoughts had value and were worth expressing. And that helped me a lot. I also think it's truer now than ever before, because like I said before, with touching on social media and stuff, people feel they have a place to hide behind when they want to express negativity or judgment on you. And it's really easy to do that. And I think that if you don't have a very strong belief in yourself, that might affect you more.
Absolutely. And I think you also said something about just the people you choose to surround yourself with.
Yes.
The inside job is what I hear you saying right out of the gates, obviously. Yeah. But the people that you surround yourself with and their input is crucial, especially at that young age. I mean, I say to my children, period, and it comes to what you're saying as far as trusting your instincts, because I have a dude who's, he's 13 years old. So, he's a guy, and I get him, right? But then I have these two little girls who I'm still, mystified by, right?
Yeah, of course.
And yet I can't step back and say, I'm mystified. Good luck. I have to look at how I can step in and share from this perspective of creating some space for them to find their own self-esteem, for them to find their own self-confidence, for them to trust their intuition. And I said to all of them a number of times, because, we're all thick, it takes some reminding, we have to be told things over and over again. And I said, listen, guys, as you get older, or wherever you are right now, because you guys are going on play dates and you're going to birthday parties, you're going to sleepovers, and it's only going to keep going. You're going to be going to parties and you're going to be going to events. And I said, try this. If you're somewhere and you don't think you should be there, if you don't feel that you should be where you're at, you shouldn't.
Right.
Just leave. Just tell your friends we're out. Whatever you got to do, but I want you to really trust that instinct, that intuition, that something inside of you says there's something wrong here.
Yeah, and you really, that is such a thing that we've all experienced, right?
Yes.
We have all been in situations, whether or not it was as children or as adults, but where inside you go, this isn't right. Something about this doesn't feel good. Something about this feels off. Something about this, whether it's, I don't like this person, or I don't like this environment, whatever. Yeah. Listen to that, pay attention to it. And because it's right, you're feeling that way for a reason. That doesn't come out of nowhere. And that very rarely leads to something good. So, I think that's really spot on.
And I feel like we have to foster that. We have to promote that in ourselves. Because if you ignore it and you ignore it and you ignore it, that little voice gets quieter and quieter and quieter. And sometimes you just kind of dismiss it. And so I really want my children to foster it, to allow it, to practice it, and to strengthen it.
Right.
And that's going to, I believe and hope, serve them in their lives moving forward.
Yeah.
I didn't have quite that sort of guidance when I was younger. You just kind of, good luck.
Right.
You know, really. I mean, there wasn't the kind of conversations or tools that we have in our lives today more available. But I wanted to hear perspective from you, obviously having, walked that path much differently than I have, obviously. And I also just knew because you seem to have, an interest in sharing that with the young women of our world.
I do. And I want so much more. One of the things that I'm really hoping to kind of find when I get back to LA after this move and after this summer, is a way to do more of that, a way of kind of reaching out to teenagers in Los Angeles, and not just ones interested in the arts, but just any of them, and just sort of talk to them, just because I think there's a lot going on at that time in your life that's confusing and weird. And I would like to do my part as somebody who feels like I had kind of a unique experience to draw from, and maybe some of them might find it cool and then give me a chance to talk to them maybe. So that's kind of something I would really like to do more of.
Yes, you have a unique perspective, but you also have that space that people are willing to listen to you because of your background, and then you can step in and provide something. It's why, wanting to do this podcast was part of the reason for potentially somebody listening and then saying, oh, wow, maybe I'm not alone in this. Maybe there is a different perspective that I wasn't aware of. I mean, one of the women I interviewed shared about the fact that somebody told her that she had a choice in life, and she never even considered that. She just thought like, oh, this is the way it's going. My life is just going to be this unsatisfying, scary space. And she didn't, and somebody came along and said, hey, you have a choice. You can do this. You can choose the light, or you can choose the dark. And she was dumbfounded by that. So being able to have conversations like this to provide a new opening for possibility for people is crucial.
Oh yeah. It's major.
Well, I wish you luck with your move.
Thank you.
And let me know when you get into town.
I will.
And thank you so much for taking time out of, I know, which is a stressful time while you're packing. So,
of course. No, I really think it's so awesome what you're doing. Let me know, how I can help, and let me know when you're going to pop this one up there, and, so that I can tell people to go listen to it.
I will.
All right, cool. Thanks so much.
All right. Have a good one.
All right. You too. I'll talk to you later.
Bye. Today's episode is sponsored by Audible.com and Amazon Fresh. Check out those promotional giveaways on the front page of my website. Stay tuned for more episodes of Breakthroughs with Jordan Murphy. Check out my website at breakthroughswithjordanmurphy.com. Stay connected on Instagram at Breakthroughs with Jordan and Twitter at Jordan D. Murphy. And if you have a great story to share, as I'm sure many of you do, go to my website at breakthroughswithjordanmurphy.com and shoot me an abbreviated version of your story to my email. I'll give it a read and maybe share a couple of them on the show.